Hey guys, Sky here, and whoa, he's finally talking about Conquest. Yeah, sorry this one took so long, but when doing research for this video, it kind of just evolved into two different projects. I just had more to say than I thought I did, but that'll be another video. Keep an eye out for that. Anyway, do you like... Just kidding. I know you like Invincible. You're watching this video. My real question is, what's your favorite part of Invincible? There's like at least 15 correct answers, which is a lot for any show or comic. But Invincible really does just have both good writing and aura and hype moments. But of course it does. It's American shonen, you know? The power creep gets worse and worse every season, leading to infinite power scaling debates. Great fun. Anyway, there's a lot of moments I would put in this debate. I thought you were stronger, and the build up to that moment is genuinely what makes season 2. But I have a video coming on that, so let's just keep it at that, and that I really love the final day sequence later in the episode. Thank you for putting me on, Invincible. Anyway, what will you have after 500 years and just the entire Omni-Man fight is perhaps the most iconic moment in the whole story, marking an even bigger narrative shift than another moment I want to talk about, Nolan versus the Guardians. I can see an argument for either of these, where one marks the turning point from the story being a copy of every other superhero world to something darker and more subversive. The other marks the point in the story where our protagonist's biggest dreams become his worst nightmare. So I think I'd argue the Mark/Nolan fight over the killing of the Guardians simply because of the character work at play. Despite it being memed to death,
You, Dad. I still have you.
hits like a truck every time. I'm rambling. Coherently. The truth is, none of these are my favorite moments in Invincible. No. My favorite moment is what all those things were building towards. Our protagonist's greatest challenge and his greatest triumph. Of course, I'm talking about Carlquest. Yeah, okay, I want to talk about Conquest for a bit. I promise, it plays into my argument, I swear. The idea of Carlquest is just incredible. I can't find it now, but like so many things, this was put most succinctly in a random tweet that went something like, having your race of fascist supermen be immediately taken out by love and affection is the most hilarious and realistic outcome. And, like, yeah, it really is. The reason the Conquest meme is so compelling is because it's a natural result of the text itself. For example, Conquest's loneliness monologue is there to show just how detached and yet similar Viltrumite society is to humanity. The Season 4 flashbacks add a lot to this too, with the coming-of-age ceremony involving a 2v1 with your parents, the brutality of the Purge, the devastation of the Scourge virus, the fucking graveyard around Viltrum. It's not hard to see why the Viltrumites are so messed up. Rewatching the show with these scenes for context brings a new level of understanding to Nolan's character, I find. If Nolan completed his mission on Earth, he very well could have been the savior of his race. Of course the mission was more important than Mark or Debbie, right? I know it's messy to jump around continuities like this, but in the comics, when Nolan tells Child Mark his lies about Viltrum, he also adds in how at home he felt at Earth, how he instantly loved its people, its culture, and he knew what he wanted to do. However, the truth he tells to Mark reshapes that enthusiasm into disappointment and disillusionment for his pitiful inheritance. The comic is never explicit about which of these two versions of the story is the real one, but in retrospect, Nolan was telling the truth and lying both times. Of course, he didn't adore humans the moment he arrived on Earth, but he definitely didn't want off Earth as bad as he suggested. In the same issue, he refers to Darkwing as his friend, admits that he began to forget his mission, and it's not until he's removed from these things that he realizes how much he actually valued them. I know what you're all thinking. Why the fuck is he talking about Nolan so much? I thought this was a Conquest video. Yeah, fair point. But the thing about Viltrumites is that it's kind of hard to understand their psychology or just sympathize with them as a human. Like, yeah, a human can be detached from the rest of society, but that still wouldn't compare to how far gone the average Viltrumite is. Think about it. The average Viltrumite is coming up on 1,000 years old, has almost no concept of affection or companionship, has watched most everyone they know die, and has killed more people than they could ever remember. My point is that I have to talk about Nolan to talk about the psychology of really any Viltrumite because he's the only one who's actually self-aware. As of Season 4, Nolan is the only traditional Viltrumite with the capacity for self-reflection. This is definitely one of those aspects that is better explored in the show than in the comics, and as much as I'm not a fan of Robert Kirkman's overly explanatory dialogue, I do really appreciate Nolan's reaction to the death of the Thraxans in the comics. It's pretty similar to the show, but I think the wording here gives a better insight into the Viltrumite rationale for their emotional detachment. Anyway, I believe it's this capacity for self-reflection, this capacity for very real change, which Argyle detested, and Thrag sought to eliminate with the Purge. As we saw with Nolan's father, however, the Purge didn't really work. Even the great Nolan crumpled to his local baddie, even the Grand Regent wept at the loss of his home, and even General Krieg crumpled to a pack of Marlboro Reds. My point is that all Viltrumites deep down obviously long for human affection, and not even Thrag, the greatest Viltrumite of all time or whatever, is immune, but that's for later seasons. 1,000 words in and I promise we're gonna get to the Conquest content. Yeah, no, Thrag isn't the most Viltrumite. That honor goes exclusively to my boy.
Take it to your grave.
Here we have Carlquest. He graduated summa cum laude at the University of Vermont, and he is a certified psychopath. Conquest has a larger and more important effect on the broader narrative than almost any other villain in the story, and despite Angstrom being one of the greatest haters of all time, I'd argue that really Conquest is Mark's greatest enemy. One day I'll do a video on how Thrag is the anti-Mark, but let's not get sidetracked. Anyway, to slightly recap, and spoilers, Season 2 follows Mark's struggle to prove he's not a killer like his father, only to end with him killing Angstrom at the climax of the season. The next season then follows Mark's struggle to restrain himself, and the guilt he feels over that murder, only to learn all of that internal turmoil was for naught, and Angstrom was alive the whole time. And on top of that, if Mark had killed him, the actual most devastating event in the narrative thus far would have never happened. It's at this point that Mark kinda breaks a little, and he doesn't get to kill Angstrom, but when Conquest arrives...
So the only thing I want to do right now is hit something as hard as I can.
I adore that it is at this point in the narrative, when Mark decidedly shifts more towards Viltrumite values, that the epitome of Viltrumite ideology shows up. Like I said, no one has ever been more Viltrumite than Conquest. He is perhaps Argyle's only true success story. Under his rule, Conquest became by far the most terrifying, cold, unfeeling, and most importantly, broken Viltrumite. Just look at his house. You know, I'd probably argue Conquest on Earth alone is scarier than all the Viltrumites combined. Why? Because he enjoys this.
See, to me, there is no greater pleasure than feeling the warmth of my fists drenched in blood.
I mean, that being said, he did say that he was starting to understand Mark's admiration for these creatures, so maybe give it 20 more minutes and he would have found his local gilf and we would have had Conquest comics. Anyway, there's genuinely no telling how much worse this fight could have been if Eve didn't do her thing. Let's talk about Eve for a second. This is tangential, but I think it's interesting. A lot of people like to talk about how dirty the show does Eve, but I bet those people don't know that Eve didn't even get to put up a fight against Conquest in the comics. Whereas in the show, Eve puts up an insane fight, and Loki does comparably better than Mark. Like, look at this shit. Oh my god, you changed the density of the air? Eve's powers are really cool, and a lot better explored in the show, but that's a video for another day. Anyway, back to Conquest. The actual hardest boss fight in the game. They made it clear from the start that he was going to be the hardest boss fight. Since Krieg gave Mark his father's mission, the narrative is haunted by the growing fear of the next Viltrumite agent. That tension is made even more real and palpable when Anissa shows up. It's a bit of a red herring, but even she works to indirectly warn Mark about him. Because, you know, she's like weirdly obsessed with Mark. Hope that plot doesn't go anywhere. Anyway, so what does happen when that final boss shows up? Well, up until this point, in the show at least, Mark had lost most fights of this caliber, and because of that, he'd been living in fear and training non-stop for this exact occasion. And this time, he wins. Yes, we love making fun of Mark for his ironic name and getting his ass kicked and even killed all the time, but thank God those people don't know about the comic power scaling. No, in the show, the superior adaptation, mind you, Mark struggles hard all the time, and this specifically works to make the Viltrumites, the main villains of the story, carry a certain amount of dread and inherent stress with them. In other words, aura and hype moments. And no one represents this quite like Carlquest. That's what makes this victory so satisfying and so important. Unlike most boss fights Mark has gone through at this point, he doesn't actually lose anything. Not his dad, not his moral code, not even his wifey poo. All things considered, the Carlquest fight goes pretty well. And it's because Mark actually wins for once that he can take something away from it other than trauma. It's not immediately obvious what it is that Mark learns from this fight. The immediate context would have you think it's Mark getting rid of his no-kill rule, justifying to himself that sometimes he should kill, sometimes it's worth it. But with the larger context of the narrative and how the superior adaptation has been presenting these story beats, I think it's something else entirely.
I am so lonely.
Carlquest's loneliness monologue is a creation of the show, and like all things that are show exclusive, they're added with the larger narrative in mind. I take back what I said about Nolan before. This is our best look into Viltrumite psychology. Argall's vision of Viltrumite culture had erased any remnant of compassion or companionship, but it seems to me that isn't really a Viltrumite's nature. Because despite millennia of trauma and brainwashing, this monologue shows that even the living embodiment of Argall's philosophy, deep down, yearns for that kind of love. Let's also not forget that in the comics, Nolan specifically states that physical intimacy for the enjoyment of it was alien to him, and given Anissa's track record, I think it's safe to say how Viltrumites are conceived. My point is, Carlquest's loneliness speech plants the seed in Mark that will eventually allow compassion to prevail at the end of the narrative. I'm gonna elaborate on that a little bit, but before I do that, let's not forget that the fight is fucking sick. I mean, look at this shit. I don't care about the floating PNGs. I'm here for this.
This is going to be amazing.
Yeah, but okay. One more thing I'd like to bring up is just a little proof of where the show is taking Mark's character. No spoilers for the comics, I just don't see enough people talking about this. Cecil's origin is shown right after his fight with Mark to draw parallels between the two, yes, and also foreshadow where Mark will end up. Like Mark, Cecil was righteous in his youth and believed that evil people deserved death. But both characters had a seed planted in them by their mentors, the idea that maybe some people shouldn't die, that some of them might be capable of doing good, that maybe they can be redeemed.
Look, kid, we've had our differences, but we're still on the same side. We're still trying to save lives, and we're still the good guys.
Yes, Mark did make fun of Carlquest for the loneliness monologue, but then again, Nolan buried Carlquest. Oliver had an issue with that, but Mark didn't. Mark lets the Viltrumites stay on Earth. I think maybe, deep down, he knows Earth's gonna win. Just like it won with Nolan. I guess that just leaves me with one question, and that is, Argall, who hurt you?
Got another one over here.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm. You were given orders. You were given time. You were given more leeway than most, and yet I find this planet unprepared for the arrival of our Viltrum Empire.
This isn't a good time.
The Empire anticipated your resistance, which is why they sent me. I am Carlquest, and I am your last chance to fulfill your duty.
You don't understand. All this is my fault. So the only thing I want to do right now is hit something as hard as I can.
Good.
Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this one. This one felt more essay-y to me. Like, I don't know if it's as funny as my other videos, but you know, I'm recording this before it's done, so we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. You know, I've been reading Invincible. Oh, shit. I've been reading Invincible for this, of course, and you know, that's reading Invincible has like given me a new perspective on how incredible of an adaptation the show is. Like, there are certain episodes that are like almost one-to-one, like the Invincible War, and most of the Carlquest fight is a pretty faithful adaptation of the, you know, of the comic, like almost one for one, beat for beat, and everything that they add is for the better. My god, this show expands the characters in such an incredible way, and I get that. That's how comics are. They're like the comic's called Invincible, so the main character is invincible, but like also let's just treat Rudy as the deuteragonist. Why not? Whatever. I'm rambling. My point is that the show is an incredible adaptation, and that might be a hint as to what I'm working on. Okay. All right. Toby, and I think I'm gonna end up doing that Star Wars video before the next Invincible video, because I don't think I should do 2 Invincible videos in a row. But I will post a poll, so you guys should look at that. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.